Right beneath the weathered wooden gate, 8 bodies were swaying. They were hanging upside down, their feet bound to a wooden beam, long hair cascading down like black curtains fluttering in the wind. They were 8 Apache girls, their bodies bruised, their breaths as thin as threads. Jackson leapt off his horse, his heart pounding so hard it ached. He cut each one down, catching them in arms that trembled with rage. No one deserved to be treated like this. No one. When the last girl had been laid down, Jackson looked around the desolate land he had spent his whole life trying to claim. And suddenly, he understood. Peace is never truly found in places bought too cheaply or too late. But still, he was here. And those 8 dying girls, they needed him now. Inside the old wooden cabin, the firelight from the stove flickered across the exhausted faces of the 8 Apache girls Jackson had just rescued. He laid out blankets one by one, placing them close together to keep warm. Their bodies were so cold that his hands went numb just touching them. Jackson heated water and used the herbs he had brought from the north to brew a remedy. He was no healer, but he had once saved his own life during long years of wandering. Now he was trying to do the same for someone else. One of them opened her eyes first. A girl with hair down to her waist, a thin face, and eyes sharp as flint. Arya. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a breath of wind. You are not with the Derringers. Jackson let out a dry laugh. If I were one of them, you would not be breathing to ask me that. Arya looked around and saw her sisters covered with blankets, given water, and surrounded by Jackson's clumsy but sincere efforts. She touched the bandage on her wrist and gave a small nod, the Apache gesture of thanks. Another girl, LRA, whose eyes were clear yet unyielding, was the first to sit up. You saved us, but why? Jackson paused, staring into the fire. Because some things you just cannot walk past. He did not need to say more. Their eyes understood everything. As their strength slowly returned, Arya took a deep breath and began to speak. Each word like a thorn. This ranch, it was never yours. It never belonged to any white man. This is our father's land, sacred land of our people. Jackson sat down, listening like a man who had just spent his life savings on a piece of land, only to find it had been paid for in someone else's blood. Adiakin, the Derringer clan came here 10 years ago. They wanted to seize the underground spring. The only thing that keeps this land alive through the dry season. Our father said, no, they killed our family, our entire tribe, except for the 8 of us, LRA added, her voice trembling slightly, but held firm. Our father split the map of the water source into 8 parts. Each of us carries one piece. The Derringers could not kill us. Because they have not yet taken the full map. Then why were you hanging upside down at my gate? Jackson asked. Arya looked him straight in the eye, not flinching, to draw someone out, to see who would dare come for us, and to capture him and rip the truth from his mouth. Jackson felt a chill crawl through him, despite the fire burning beside him. He had walked straight into a trap, not by chance, but by stepping right into the line of fire in a blood feud generations deep. Nima, the youngest and weakest of the group, spoke with words so faint they broke between breaths. If you let us go, you can still leave before they come back. Jackson stood and walked to the window, staring out at the thickening darkness. The strange signs around the ranch had left no doubt in his mind anymore. They knew someone had rescued the 8 girls, and they would return soon. Jackson replied softly, without turning his head. I spent my whole life to buy this land, but if this land belongs to you, I am not going to leave you behind on it. Arya looked at her sisters, then at Jackson. In her eyes, a faint glimmer of hope flickering in the heart of a dead desert. The desert night wind carried a skin-cutting chill, slipping through every gap in the ranch's rotting wooden walls. Inside, the 8 Apache girls had fallen into an exhausted sleep. Leaving Jackson alone by the window, a Winchester rifle resting across his knees. He could feel danger creeping in like a snake's shadow, slow but certain. Without warning, the sound of hooves echoed from afar, ringing out like a war drum across the sand. Jackson shot to his feet. The iron clatter grew louder, then stopped right at the gate. A voice rang out from the darkness, drawn out and lazy, but laced with lethal intent. Jackson Hale, I know you're in there. The wind-rattled door trembled softly. The 8 girls jolted awake, eyes wide with fear. Arya placed a hand on Jackson's arm and gave a slight shake of her head, but he simply raised a finger to his lips, a silent call for quiet. Jackson stepped onto the front porch, moonlight casting his shadow against the figure of a man on horseback, Vandrich Boone. Boone was not the kind to kill in secret. He carried himself with confidence, arrogant even. His long hair was tied back low. A worn black leather coat hung off his shoulders, and a coiled rope hung from his saddle, one that had seen more than its share of hangings. Boone gave a cold smile. Well, you made quite the move, Hale, touching what belongs to the Derringers without asking. Jackson leaned one hand against a porch post, his gaze calm. Yours, huh? All I saw were 8 people hung up like animals. I cut them down. That's it. Boone laughed. A sound laced with steel. You should have let them die. Would have been easier on them. And on you, Jackson replied evenly. I am not handing them over. The corner of Boone's mouth twitched a rare crack in his composure. Those girls are holding pieces of our family's map. This land, that water, the entire valley, it all belongs to the Derringers. I came to take back what is ours. He leaned forward in the saddle, his voice dropping low. Hand them over now. Jackson did not move. You're not taking anything from here. Boone stared at him for a long moment. The silence thick as embers in a furnace. Then he took a slow breath and straightened up. Fine. Tonight I came alone. As a courtesy, he tilted his head, voice sharpening like a blade. Tomorrow I come back with the gang. And then there will be no more talking. He yanked the reins, spun the horse in one dramatic turn, and galloped into the darkness, leaving behind a howl of wind and the echo of a bloody promise. Jackson stood still until the hoof beatots faded into the night. When he turned back inside, the 8 girls looked at him, not with fear, but with a mix of horror and gratitude. Arya stepped forward, her voice low and firm. You are not one of us. You still have time to leave before sunrise. Jackson let out a breath and pulled the curtain shut. I bought this land with every dollar I had saved in my life. But now I realize something. He looked at each of them in turn. I did not buy land. I bought a war. And he knew that war would arrive with the first light of dawn. The desert night fell fast. Like a black blanket thrown over the land. As the sun slipped behind the red rock ridges, Jackson felt it. Something was off. No coyotes howled. No crickets sang, just a thick silence, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. Arya stepped up beside him on the front porch, her voice low. Boone never makes threats and walks away. When he says tomorrow, he means tonight. Jackson gave a slight nod. I know. Around midnight, the wind suddenly shifted, carrying a faint scent of smoke. Jackson jumped to his feet and ran outside. Behind the old cattle barn, flames flickered in the dark. Boone had made his move. Do not go out there. LRA grabbed Jackson's arm. They're trying to lure you in. Jackson paused for a second. As furious as he was, he knew she was right. If he ran out, he would be the first target. But watching the fire eat away at the barn, the very place he had planned to rebuild and raise a few horses to start a new life, Jackson felt his chest tighten. Boone was not just burning a barn. He was burning his dream. So, the calmest of the 8 sisters grabbed a blanket and raced around back with Nima. Jackson followed them, and the 3 worked to stomp out the remaining embers before the flames could reach the house. While they worked, a distant horse's scream tore through the night. The sound cut like a blade. Paha ran to the gate, then dropped to her knees, stunned. Jackson, your horse. Only the saddle remained, tossed onto the sand, the reins shredded. They did not need to kill him. They only needed to make sure he could not escape. Boone had left a message as clear as a signature carved into the dark. You will stay and you will die. When the fire was finally out, they all went back inside. Everyone was exhausted. But no one could sleep. They gathered around the fireplace. The flames casting shadows across young faces marked with old wounds. The Daringers, they never stop. Neresu whispered, gripping the edge of her blanket. Anyone who helps us becomes a target, too. Jackson leaned against the wall, wiping soot from his hands. I know, but tonight you saved me. At least all of you did. 8 pairs of eyes turned toward him. A long silence settled in, not the silence of fear, but the silence of something new. A connection thin as thread, but strong enough to begin tying them together. Arya spoke. We used to believe outsiders would never stand with us. She looked straight at Jackson, her gaze soft, but sharp like forged steel. Maybe we were wrong. Jackson did not answer right away. He simply handed each of them a cup of warm water. One by one, their hands trembling from cold and fear, reached out and accepted it. As they sat in the glow of the fire, a rock suddenly hit the window, startling the whole house. Wrapped around the stone was a scrap of rough paper. On it, the message was scrolled. Tomorrow we take the people. We take the land. Anyone who resists gets buried with them. Jackson read it, folded it, and tossed it into the fire. His eyes gleamed with a cold, frightening resolve. From now on, he said, no one here is alone. The 8 sisters looked at each other, then back at the man who had accidentally stepped into their war and chosen to stay. Out there, Boone's fire had gone out. But inside this small house, another fire had just begun to burn. Thank you so much for being here with me. Let me know where you are listening from. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel to support my work. I truly hope you stay safe and find happiness wherever you are hearing this from. The next morning arrived with a pale, washed-out light, as if even the sun was afraid to shine too brightly on land so heavy with dark energy. Jackson had not slept, and neither had the 8 sisters. Through the night, they took turns standing watch, listening to every shift of the wind, trying to sense whether Boone would return. But at dawn, it was someone else who came. The sound of hooves rose from the distance, slow, steady, nothing like Boone's threatening rhythm. Jackson stepped out onto the porch, rifle still in hand. Behind him, the 8 girls readied their weapons, arrows, and flint knives in tense hands. A middle-aged man approached on horseback. His hair was silver. His eyes carried the weight of a life that had seen too much, and a faded badge glinted beneath the desert dust. Marshal Rovan Pike. He raised both hands, voice growly from years of smoke, but calm. Put the gun down, Hale. I am not here to cause trouble. Jackson did not lower the rifle, but he did not raise it either. Who are you looking for? Not looking, Pike answered. Here to warn, he dismounted, opened a leather satchel, and pulled out a bundle of files tied with a thin rope. The papers were smoke-stained, the edges scorched as if they had narrowly escaped, being erased from history altogether. He placed the bundle in Jackson's hands. The Daringers, I have been tracking them for over 8 years. Murder, bribing judges, land theft, wiping out every trace of their crimes against native tribes. Arya stepped forward, her gaze sharp as an Apache arrow. You knew and you let them live. Pike let out a heavy sigh. Girl, the Daringers are not just rich. They have roots in the courts, in the banks, in the hands of every patrol commander. Every time I tried to bring them to trial, a